Welcome, everyone, to the Caregivers Journal podcast. I'm your co-host, Lance A. Slatton, and I, as always, am joined by my esteemed colleagues and friends, Cindy and Christina Hardin-Weiss from Adaptive Equipment and Caregiving Corner. Welcome, ladies.
Thanks, hello. Lance. How are you?
Always good to see you, so it's a good day.
Good to see you.
It's a good day. And I have the right day today because I was all ready to go yesterday, and you guys reminded me that I'm a day early, but it's better early than late.
The right month, too.
Yes, and the right month. And today we have a special guest, family caregiver, Alex Garza. Welcome, Alex. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here and share my story.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Why don't you take a minute for our viewers and listeners who may not be familiar with you, just a brief synopsis of kind of what your caregiving role is and who it's for.
Yes. Again, my full name is Alexandria, but I go by Alex, and I care for my husband who had a stroke back in 2017. He's currently hemiplegic. He can't move the left side of his body. So we've been on this journey for a little while. It's been challenging, but it's also has its rewards as well. Yeah. So I'm happy to be here to share what I've learned in that journey too.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you sharing that because, you know, when talking with family caregivers, it's very personal. It's more intimate than if you're just talking to like an author or a brand, you know, and it's not as meaningful sometimes if they don't have that personal connection. But, you know, we try to talk with just family caregivers so that they not only know they're not alone, but also to offer support to other family caregivers to let them know they're not alone and there is hope and there's light at the end of that tunnel. And, you know, we appreciate you sharing your story. I wanted to start off, though, really right off the bat with challenges because, you know, there's good days and bad days, as I'm sure you can appreciate. What are some of the biggest challenges, though, that you face in your caregiving role?
That's a great question. And the first part of that, I just really wanted to speak to, and that is like isolation, feeling like you're alone. And I think that despite even having family around, sometimes you can feel alone. Like you can still have those feelings of isolation and people not fully understanding. But I would say the biggest challenge for me has, I guess the first part of it, I would say, is just navigating the finances, right? And I'm going to just say that right off the bat, because I think that is a common element. Like, how am I going to do this? Can I work? Am I going to be able to go out and work? Can I work from home? Who's going to care for that person? And so I think that everyone has a different dynamic. So whether it's, say, child, parent, husband, wife, husband, like, or however that particular combination works out to be, I think that's the other challenge. So like now understanding my role as like a wife and a caregiver and like how that also affects my husband, like that dynamic was just figuring that out was another challenge. And then just dealing with the emotional element of that, right? It's never, everyone's in a different place on the caregiving journey, meaning that they might be caregiving for a temporary amount of time because the person's going to get better and then they're going to be better. And then you have people who they don't know, they're on edge. They're walking on that. They could be okay. They might be okay. And that's a totally different level of anxiety than you having some sort of like resolve. And then in some people it's terminal or it's long-term. And again, that's one of those roads where you don't really know where you're working. So I would say the big ones are basically the dynamic of the relationship. You know, just to be frank, you never think you're going to be cleaning your significant other. You don't know how to, it could be overwhelming to navigate the medical system and then how that flows into finances. I was going to say that money touches everything. And I thought, oh yeah, it's really powerful because you never think about it until someone's sick and then you're navigating that road. And so, and then the emotional aspects, like there was a word I learned, and it's kind of like anticipatory grief. I don't know if that's an official thing, but like sometimes you're crying and you're like, everything's okay. The person's stable, but you're crying because you feel a loss that you're dealing with an emotional thing that you're not even like able, and I could cry about it right now. Right. You're not able to like fully articulate what you're feeling. And so then people want to comfort you, and it's not really anything that can be comforted. It's just something process.
Yeah, well, I think you hit a nail on the head there, Alex. As you were talking, I was going to bring up anticipatory grief because at our support groups that we facilitate and run, the most common issue that caregivers, at least in these groups, I'm not saying it's a right or wrong or gospel, that they say is the hardest part is not only the isolation and loneliness that they feel from their peers and their social circles, not understanding really what they're going through because they've never had to experience it, but it's the anticipatory grief because they don't know when or what's going to change and how it's going to change. So they're always on those eggshells that you mentioned where, I've talked to people in grief support groups, and the grief is for after their loved one has passed. They're there because they're mourning the loss of a loved one, but they said in a way it's almost a relief because they have that closure. They no longer have to wake up every day, or if they hear something at night, well, is this it? Is this that anticipatory grief that they said was one of the most mentally and emotionally exhausting aspects of caregiving because you just don't know day to day. Is it going to be a good day? Is it going to be a bad day? Is the dementia going to advance? Has the cancer spread? Whatever the situation may be. And those are things you can't read a book and get an answer on. You can't get a test necessarily and get a result on. And it's just the anticipation of not knowing what's next. So I'm really, really thankful that you'd mentioned that. Now let's go away from some of the bad, negative challenges of caregiving. Mm-hmm. What have been some of the most rewarding moments for you that you've experienced so far?
The most rewarding, I think, is personally, is that I have had the time. I've had the time. I have been blessed to be able to work from home, and I've made very mindful and decisions around that decision. Some people might not have that option or the skill set to do it, but to be able to, I don't want to cry, but to be able to know that I have that opportunity to spend the time and to be there. I know some people get that, they're not afforded that opportunity. It's not easy in any means, but I often think yeah, I'm grateful. I'm really super grateful for that. And it's a lot of people don't get time with their loved ones, or circumstances pull them away, distance, their own family, the needs of their own immediate family. And so I think that that's been, I have a crazy sense of humor, and so does my husband. So I believe in that laughter is medicine. And so the joys of revisiting joy and humor and really making that a part of our journey, whether it's watching funny movies or cracking jokes or, doing that and making little things that I do my best. I have a personal goal, and that's like, okay, my goal is to make my husband laugh or make myself laugh at some point. Just being a goofball or whatever that takes to be funny. So that's been rewarding, tapping into like my own funny part of me. That's very much who I am. And it's the other rewarding part is I think something can happen in caregiving. And I'm a big advocate of this, and that is you get to decide how you're going to respond in that. So you can be in the mindset of my life is over, this is horrible. And in some cases, you will go through that emotional roller coaster. Or you can decide that we're just going to make the best of this. Like the situation is bad, or, it's not ideal, whatever the word you want to use. And then you can decide like, okay, but like, I'm just going to do my best, and I'm going to pull on that part of, I think there's a part in all of us that, I have a strong faith in the Lord. And so I lean into that. And so I'm like, yeah, that part of us that's given in our heart from God, that allows us to love unconditionally, even though the circumstances are so out of control. And so I think it's really important, even though it's extremely hard, to really press into that as a caregiver and allow that to become a great reward. like your attitude around it. Like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be able to manage this. I'm gonna be able to figure this out. It's not really all up to me, but I get to lean into whether it be my faith or family and really be able to like make that decision that you're gonna do your best to get the mindset
Right.
that you're gonna be able to do it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a wonderful outlook, and I just, loved everything you've said so far. I think it's just kind of the poster for what caregivers should look at when they're going into this new role, because often we don't get the benefit of preparing, planning, or even thinking about it. Do you mind me asking how young your husband is?
My husband is 68.
Okay, so
Yeah.
he was about 60 when this happened.
Mhm.
So, I mean, he was a fairly young man, still is fairly young man.
Yeah.
You guys probably never, using that word anticipation again, you probably never anticipated being in this situation. And I don't think anyone ever really truly does. They always think of it in the later years of life. But to be able to have such a strong positive outlook, and, you mentioned how, blessed and fortunate you've been. I was just thinking of all the families we've encountered with our company and through the show where, the 2-3 years of COVID was just disastrous and traumatic for them because they didn't have the benefit of, first, you're able to work at home, which is an amazing blessing in and of itself, so that you can be there for your husband. B, you have the ability to keep him in the home. Now, imagine if, during COVID, he was in a facility, you're talking to him through a window, right? And you can't even have any physical interaction, shaking, hugging, kissing, or anything. And, you got to experience that with him right there with you in the house, which I think is, again, such a blessing, and you're so fortunate. But I want to talk a little bit about hindsight, because this is a question. I think it's fun, but sometimes it's not fair because you can't change the past. You can only change the future. But when you look back right now, you've been a family caregiver for about 7-8 years, right?
Yes.
What do you wish you knew then that you know now? And now, based on everything you've said so far, Alex, I don't know what you could change that you could have improved on. And I'm just being very honest with you, right? And Cindy and Christina agree. Like,
Absolutely.
what could you do, or what do you wish you could have done differently, or that you knew 7-8 years ago when you first embarked on this?
Yeah. So I would tell myself, well, what I would tell myself, excuse me, I would tell myself that it's going to be okay. That it's going to be okay. And the things that I probably would have told myself is, and I did this instinctively, but I think it's important for other people to know, is get your things in order, like keep good records, get yourself in order. This is a real practical one. Like some people, and read. I know this sounds crazy, but like read the documents when they send you outside of the hospital, like read the labels, like do your research, right? Because when you're in a crisis situation, I think there's science around this too. Your reasoning isn't always there, right? When you're in high emotion, your reasoning is not always there. So I would say definitely make sure that you keep your paperwork, that you sit down and take a minute to read it, fully understand, because this is kind of what I did through the journey, but like fully, don't be afraid to ask questions, because especially in the hospitals and in the rehabs and the different journeys you go through, it's very easy to just do what is said to do. And I'm not saying to be medically rebellious, but I'm saying to do your research, watch programs like this, learn out there. You have to advocate. I have realized in my own personality that I didn't realize then that I had advocator in my heart or in my personality, in the sense of my husband's personality and the dynamic of a relationship is very big, very bold, and he would ask the questions, and I was the supporter in that, the dynamic of the relationship. So when it was like my turn to step up in there, I really had to lean into that questioning, asking questions, being an advocate, and also really communicating what your loved one really needs, and being able to say, hey, this isn't the right wheelchair. Can we get another wheelchair? And not feel like asking those questions. What other resources are out there for me? Because unfortunately, things aren't always told to you. Like, you think there's even if you have a social worker in that journey, right? You'd be surprised, like, all the things that are hidden. And that's what I mean by read. Like, there's so much stuff that you have to be like, is there a program for this? Can you help me with this? Is it? And if you're not asking those questions, then you just kind of float along. And then 5 years later, you're like, oh, I could have gotten a better wheelchair. Like, and that was I'm using that as an example because that was an example that actually happened to us. Like, my husband had this wheelchair. I just thought, okay, we got a wheelchair. But I didn't realize, like, there was the Cadillac of wheelchairs that was better fit for him. And that was just never told to me. And I never thought about asking until I saw someone on Instagram with this really cool wheelchair. And I was like, I could get a wheelchair like that. And so that is the thought. Like, I would just, you have to tap into your assertiveness is probably the word for. And if you're not that personality, you need to find someone in your family who is. And every family has that one person that, they might be called bossy or whatever, but they get things done. And if it's not going to be you, talk to that person and say, look, I need someone like your personality to be on, to speak on behalf of, the family member, or to help me be bold, or to make sure that I get this done. And you'd be surprised by just asking. And you're not asking them to come and like do something in your house. You're just asking them to help you really push and advocate for the person that you love.
No, that's a great answer. Before I go to my next question, Alex, just out of curiosity, you have such a positive can-do mentality, as a family caregiver, which I think is a key component to being very effective as a family caregiver. How is your husband handling this transition with his health and like his, condition?
Yeah, it's been hard. He had 2 brain surgeries. And so he's had some cognitive, issues in that. And can't move the left side of his body. So I think sometimes I overthink that reality more than he does. He's been extending a lot of grace, so he's cool. But I do sometimes ask him deeper questions, like, do you feel angry? Do you feel upset? And though he might not verbalize that, he'll tell me, yeah, so, I think it's important. And one of the things we're also exploring is just talking that out, whether it be through therapy, whatever that is, not to let it keep going in there. But he has an overall really good attitude. Sometimes it shocks me because I knew him before, type A, 100 miles per hour. And so to kind of be sidelined like that, that's a totally different thing. It's very humbling watching it, and I can only imagine his own mental thoughts. But I'm very intentional about making sure that he stays connected to how he is still has a purpose, even though for him it might seem like he doesn't have a purpose. And so I do my best to, and even in the little things, I'll tell you a funny story. I can get distracted. If you're a distracted caregiver, raise your hand. I can get totally distracted with working and then making stuff for him and doing different things. And I was cooking some rice, and I was on the phone cooking rice. He was talking to me about something, and the rice started burning, and I was like, and so I went in the room and I was like, wait. And he's looking at me. I'm like, you burned the rice. And he just looked at me, and I said, I know, it's actually, I burned the rice, but I really need your help. And he kind of looked at me and he was just kind of like, what do you want me to do? And I said, let me give you the timer. And I have a little old fashioned timer. I said, I'm going to give you the timer. And next time I make rice, I said, you need to be the sous chef and you need to make sure that you keep an eye on it, even though I know you don't see it, but you can definitely with your timer, let me know, like, it's ready, like, do that. You do that? Because I didn't put the timer on. I was just doing it like by eye. And he was like, and so it seems, maybe it seems very like minuscule or silly, but he got into it. Like the next time I was like, shh, don't burn the rice. And I gave him that responsibility with that attitude. And he was like, and lo and behold, he was shouting, rice. I was like, thank you so much. Yeah, we didn't burn the rice. And so I'm like, wow, how can I do that in other ways
Absolutely.
so that he still has like connection to like
Yeah.
he's helping something. And so we have those discussions and I'll be like, I'm thinking you need to get a job. And we have like, and he'll just be like, I said, so I'm gonna need you to what was it? I had this big box of pencils and pens. You know how we collect pencils and pens, at least I do. A literally giant box. And I was like, okay, I need to go through all these pens and kind of get rid of the ones that are, you can't write with, whatever. And he was like, okay, I said, I'm going to give you some paper and we'll go through them but don't keep it. If it's too hard to get the ink, you just throw it out. And he was like, okay. I said, I'll give you $5. I'm going to pay you for this job. And he was like, I said, you ready to earn some $5? And he's like, yeah. And I said, okay. So, he sat there. I sat there too. And we just were there with paper going through. I'm like, do not put the ones that don't work in the general population. And so just little things like that. So if you know your loved one can't, maybe they could sort things. They could maybe help if they can use both hands. Maybe they can fold things. It's just like to be helpful and then to acknowledge that help. So I think that's something that is uber important. That's really helped him. I don't know if I answered your question, but I think it really helped him in the big thing. And so he's managed. And again, humor. He tells dad jokes. He has an Instagram channel called the Lay Down Comedian, which
we'll have to put that on the screen, Alex.
Yeah, because he lays down and tells jokes.
Late owl.
Lay down. Lay down. Yeah, like instead of a stand-up comedian, he's a lay down comedian.
It's at Lay Down Comedian. Okay, we'll put it on the screen.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Well, and you've touched on so many great things. It's having a purpose, right? I mean, even if it's the silliest, most simplest thing like the pens or, the timer, it's so important. Like, I've been thinking about this gentleman that we help who retired from a great job. He was a bachelor in his early 60s, never had any kids. And, he suffered from a stroke and it left him with left-sided paralysis. And we were helping him 24/7 because he had no family. And, we tried hard to give him but he had sunken into such a deep depression and he had, some neurological changes and mood changes. It was just one of the hardest things we've dealt with. And, we've been around for about 15 years because here's a healthy man today, tomorrow he wasn't. And now, this is his future. So we tried a lot of the things you're talking about, but he was so hardened by the bitterness of what had happened to him. And I'm not even blaming him. I probably would be the same way. Right. So it's your husband is remarkably lucky to have you and to have you with the outlook and perspective that you're, bringing to, your caregiving role with him. So thank you so much. But we talked a lot about what you've done and what you're doing for your husband, but what are you doing for yourself, right? I mean, I'm assuming you said you're able to work from home, plus you're his caregiver. Where do you find the time to take care of yourself, practice that self-care? And do you have any helpful tips for other caregivers that might be in a similar role where, they're not getting their hair done, they're not going to their follow-up appointments, they're not going, whatever it is they do for themselves just to maintain, good personal health? How can they manage it? And what are you doing to manage it?
Great question. Because I always have to remind myself to do this. And this is the universal caregiver issue. Because you get isolated or you just like being home. Like I've had conclusion the other day. I was like, yeah, I probably need to make myself go somewhere, because if it's up to me, I'll just be a homebody. I actually like being home. So, and some people don't. They like want to be out and seeing life and everything. And so part of that, though, I know is just because of the circumstances, right? But some of the things that I've made myself do is I love interacting with people, right? And so even during COVID, it kind of started way back in COVID, is I do a lot of like Zoom meetings with like friends in different parts of the thing just to stay connected. That's also part of my business. So it's kind of integrated. And so I stay connected with my like peer groups, and even my clients. I just make sure I do Zoom like face-to-face meetings, so I'm not like this far off land. I personally love to sing, and I really have been leaning into music. That's always been a part of me, but I'm on the church worship team. So that was super cool, and that keeps me connected. It also allows me to use like my creative gifts in those different things. On a real practical level, I try to go outside. This is just a health thing too. I try to go outside at least 10, 15 minutes every day, even in overcast, rainy weather, crazy weather. Just go outside and get some sunlight, or walk. Like I have a little bit of distance to the mailbox, so I'll walk to the mailbox. And I mean, it sounds really simple, but some people don't even get that few seconds. And I like to do audiobooks and movies. Some of that I don't always go to the movies, but I like movies kind of help me decompress a little bit. I've rallied the family, and I think this is really important. People who don't have family, I think it's important that you create that family, whether it be family and friends, and not being afraid to ask. And I've got to say this because I was talking to another friend of mine, and she's like, yeah, she was taking care of both of her parents. And she's like, my dad is at home by himself and he needs someone there. And my mom's in the hospital and my sister. And there was just a lot of different dynamics. And I said, well, why don't you reach to some out she's in a church group. I said, why don't you reach out to some in your church group? And I think that help you. I don't want to bother anyone. I said, you're not bothering me. I said, I know that there's some woman or man in that group that would love to help you to come sit with your dad for a few hours, watch a movie, bring him some lunch. You just have to let the need be known, because there are people who are literally like, I want to be helpful, but I don't know how to be helpful. And unless you communicate, then you are perpetuating your situation longer. And so she was like, okay, whether she did it or not, I don't know. But I was just like, don't be afraid to ask. And I had to do that too, because like you said, like, I can do it. I want to get it done. Like, I have to be in control, all those different things. But I've learned that giving other people an opportunity to help can also be a blessing to them. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we think, oh, we don't want that to be a burden. We don't want to ask them. But I say, look, this is different than like, say, having a full-time caregiver, but someone would love just to come sit with your loved one while you go to the doctor's appointment. And so, being blessed with my husband's 4 brothers and 2 sisters, I've really had to like lean into that. Like, okay, Alex, you're not alone. This isn't the journey for you. Like, you have brothers and sisters here. Allow them that opportunity. And I say allow them that opportunity because as a caregiver, sometimes you can get very possessive of the one that you love. Like, no one can take care of them like I can. And guess what? That's probably true. But there's other people who can probably do it like 80, 75%, even 50% will help you go do something. And so asking that, I know there was a day when I was overwhelmed. I had everything going on. I had calls going on, and then my husband was like, food, like he's very passionate about food, and he was screaming food in the background, food. And I was just like, I just stopped. And I texted my brother-in-law and I said, could you order us a pizza? First, that's what I said. Could you order us a pizza? Like, I could have stopped and just ordered a pizza. but I was beyond my capability to do that in the moment. And I just said, and he ended up calling me and I said, yeah, could you order some pizza? And I knew he heard it in my voice. Like, I just need help. And a pizza being at my door in 20 minutes would be amazing. and he was like, yeah. And they asked me what was on it. And, we didn't go into like, I'm overwhelmed, I've got a million things to do. He had enough discernment and know to like, okay, you just need this right now. And so having those people on speed dial, whoever it is, if it's your neighbor or the person that you adopt because you love them and now they're your mom, just being able to say, hey, can I put you on my support team that if I'm overwhelmed and I call you and ask you for a pizza, you can do that for me. and whatever it is. And so, yeah, so those are little things that I've learned to do, like have people and then, just coordinating your own care. And if you're blessed to have a family that knows that you're important to the whole equation and not take you for granted, because a lot happens a lot too, then leaning into them and asking them and really calling them up to the plate too. Because brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles and those people, a lot of times they want to help, but they don't know how, or they feel maybe like they're getting in your way of what you do. So they don't want to like cause any problems. But I tell my family, like, my biggest stressor is like figuring out like what to make that's for food, like all that time. And you'd be surprised how many people would be like, that's what's stressing you. That's what's stressing you. It's not the other stuff. I'm like, the other stuff isn't. This is that right now. This is what's causing me mental bandwidth that I would love for help with. So when they call and they're like, oh, we made some extra, chicken salad, we're coming by. I'm like, yes. Simple. So I find those things for myself are putting those people in place and then making myself go out, even when I don't feel like going. I need to make myself go and have fun. I need to make myself go and out to a restaurant with other family members and not feel bad that Ray can't be there. That's hard too. When you go somewhere and you feel guilty because the other person can't be there. That totally is not a good feeling. It's sometimes, if I think about it, I'm like, oh, horrible.
Is that self-imposed guilt, Alex, or does he help?
Oh no, he doesn't. We have conversations. I went on a family trip to go see my family out east, and I talked to him about it. I said, "You're gonna hold down the fort. You think, am I good to go?" And he was like, "I said, okay, good." So I was grateful. He didn't give me like, sometimes right before I go somewhere, he'll be like, "Don't go, don't go, don't go." I'm like, "That's okay. I'll be back. So and so is gonna be here. I'm going to go and I'll be back in this amount of time, whatever." And he'll be like, okay. So some of that is just reassurance. But that don't go part of sometimes kind of goes, ugh. But at the same time, I'm like, no, like I've got to go. And even on my trip, he did just fine. I called in the A team and they were all here and he did really well. And it was so healing for me, like to be connected to, I've got 3 beautiful little nieces and a brother, my sister-in-law, my mom and dad, and we had like a little family reunion. It had been a while since we all been in the same room. And so it was super healing. And I think on that trip, I just realized like I was super emotional, like, wow, sometimes it's so easy to feel disconnected, even with the people that you love the most.
Right. Before I turn it over to Christina, just a quick question for you. Do you talk a lot about listening to audiobooks and, reading all of your medical documents and, things like that. But are there any resources that you found or that you seek out that have been supportive in helping you on your caregiving journey, like websites or books or anything?
Yeah. So I started an Instagram channel called Caregiver Talks. I don't have a whole bunch of stuff on there, but like the basic ones is like your local state, aged and disabled, like, I think aging. Yeah, if you just Google that, you could find 211 is another one. Reaching out to your utilities, like electric, and letting them know like that you have a person in the house that might have medical equipment. Because my husband has an electric bed. A lot of people have electric beds, but out here in Texas, we get those storms every once in a while and power goes out, and he has an air loss mattress. So we had quite an experience where the power went out for 2 hours and now he's sitting on a metal frame. Yes. The bed is flat. And I'm like, what am I going to do? Because I could get him out of the bed and I wanted to move him to another bed, but I didn't have the Hoyer lift that I have. Didn't go underneath the other bed. So it became a little bit of a dramatic scene. But I learned like to make sure he's on that list. You get, I guess, I don't know the right word. Is it priority status, or they at least know that someone in your house, if that needs medical equipment. So you're put on that list so that they know. In that process, I learned about STAR or STEER. I can't remember the name of it, but it's a program that also, if there is a national emergency, like you have to be evacuated, you also let the government know like your situation so that they can come and pick you up and get you to the right facility. I think about that a lot, especially with all the natural disasters that we've had. It just breaks my heart when I see nursing homes and I think about people who are in certain situations that evacuating isn't like a little easy thing, right? They got equipment, they've got machines, and you think about, oh, like, how are they going to just get up and go? And maybe they don't have a handicap van, or maybe they don't have someone who can drive it, or there's like a million scenarios. But at least putting people on alert. And then on that same note, like if you have other family members or friends that you can say, hey, can you be our emergency backup? Like, can you come over and make sure that we get out of here safely and those different things. So yeah, so those are the ones, like the 211, I think it's 211 is the main one that you can call. I think that's every state has it, like Texas 211, California 211. And then yeah, the Alamo out here, it's like the Alamo age. They've been a real blessing, and I've asked lots of questions, and they've been a blessing to me personally with different programs that they have that are not always income based. Sometimes they just have programs that there's like pots of money that are given to the state to disperse for just the need in general.
Okay. Well, thank you. Alex, I'm going to turn it over to Christina.
Yay!
Cindy, I'm going to have you ask questions.
All right, I'll go ahead.
I've got a list of questions that
you want to bring up the rear, don't you? Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, Alex, I appreciate you saying we were talking earlier about you were talking about your instance with the wheelchair with Ray, and the fact that you found out later, oh, that's not the right wheelchair. I that's a very good point, because a lot of times we see, a lot of times in healthcare, we've kind of got, this is kind of a standard thing, and we're going to get you and we're going to discharge you, and you're going here and you're going there. And I hate to say that, but sure, we all know it kind of gets that way. Yeah. And as a family caregiver, or as the advocate for that person, I agree with you that you really have to step up, and you've got to kind of listen to your gut also. And, if something doesn't look right or doesn't feel right, you've got to question. And even after the fact, a lot of times during that transition home, you really have to push those therapists in the hospital or the rehab to say, here's my circumstance, because they don't know your home. Mm-hmm. Back in the day, we used to be able to go to the home before we would discharge from a rehab, but they don't always do that anymore. So they don't know that. So you really have to kind of push for those things and advocate so that you don't get home and don't have the right equipment, or, if things change. So I like that you brought that point up. It's very, very important. Mm-hmm. We also you talked early on about how your role changed, and obviously that is a huge change. And can you kind of let us know, or let other caregivers know, or give them a piece of advice on how you handled those two different roles that you ended up having to handle as the wife and as the caregiver? And if you could give them a piece of advice as a new caregiver, how to go about kind of keeping those two roles distinctive.
Yeah. I think the first thing is letting the person know, like in husband, wife, or your significant other, like letting them know that at least this is how I do it. Like it ain't nothing. Like, it ain't a big thing. Like,
Right.
me being here, cleaning you up, doing what we got to do, you're not a burden. Like, I literally say this out loud. Like, I just want you to know you're not a burden.
Mhm.
Like, this is what we're dealing with, and we're just going to deal with it. So, for lack of better vocabulary, it ain't no thing. Like, I feel like that. It's not a thing. Like, this is just, hey, I never thought I'd be doing this.
Right.
But, like, this is what it is. And so if there's going to be someone who is, I'm relating it to, say, like toileting and like cleaning up and, all those different things. It's like, yeah, I'm sure you didn't expect this, but this is where we're at. And so at least, we have, it's going. Now, some people feel very different and they bring in a caregiver for that. And that's great. And I understand that different dynamic. But for me, I just said it's not, I didn't make it a huge thing. I just made it like it is. So sometimes I think if you're not communicating that, I tend to be a straight communicator. So if you're not just saying it straight, then sometimes people just need it straight. Like, don't worry about it. Like, everybody, when there's that little kid's book, right? Like, everybody poos, everybody pees. It's very like simplistic, but I kind of approach it in that way. Like, it's not a problem. And what was the other part of that question again?
So are there anything, so for example, so you are his full-time caregiver, but as his wife,
yes.
His partner, do you try to make time or do specific things like make sure that you're sitting down and eating dinner with him or something like that to kind of delineate between, okay, now this is, now I'm your wife, not that changes.
You make an announcement, but yeah, I know.
This time I'm your wife today. Yeah.
I know I'm your wife. Yeah. So this is very nuanced, but, I will ask him his thoughts, or like I did before, hey, I want to do this. Like, are you good with that? Right. So it's a decision that we're making together. I'll do things like, oh yeah, you got to pay the rent today. Like things like that. But I'll report back. You paid the rent. Woo! Things like that. So he understands that he's still, involved in participating in some of the financial duties. Now, these might be traditional type views, but it's the dynamic of our relationship. So I'll just be like, oh yeah, you paid the rent, and he'll be like, and in that relationship, I will tell him I will tell him that there is statistical evidence that hugs are good. They help good things in your body. He's super sensitive to touch, but I will tell him, I'll give him hugs, and then I'll be like, and I know this bothers you, but I'm still gonna hug you. I will tell him, let's spoon, like I'm gonna be the big spoon, like just I know I don't switch information, but I'll be like cuddle with him, so certain, intimate things, that is, very much connected, because that was important. I think it's important in any marriage, to not feel, I tell him out loud, like, oh my gosh, like, I'm not sure. I'll kid around with him and I'll be like, you're so handsome. We've always been that handsome. So like different things to, just so he doesn't feel like, certain words. I don't really like to use the word diapers. He has some cotton supplies. So I'm like, briefs, underwears, I just say it as that, like, hey, we're going to clean up this brief or whatever, and just like we would like I try to do things that we would have normally, or sayings that we would do, or movie quotes, and just that banter that we would have before. And then, just the little things that of the dynamic of relationships that we all have that are personal to you guys. I just lean into that a little bit more. I tend to make things bigger, than they might necessarily be. And then, like, emotions. Like I have some people are like, don't let them see you cry or stress out in front of them. I'm like, no, I'm pretty emotional in front of him. I'll just sometimes cry and I'll just be like, for lack of a better word, I'll just be like, this totally sucks. Like this sucks. I know this sucks. You know, and I'll cry and I'll be like, I just need you to comfort me, or you know, I'm very again, and he'll make those efforts, and so that isn't really what a caregiver would do. So that really kind of separates. So I now at the same time too, I don't bring him things that could cause him too much stress. Sometimes I'll come to him with an issue, like this is the issue. What do you think we should do? And he'll be like. And I'm like, no, think about it. I don't need an answer right now, because part of the cognitive thing is, you know, he's processing. So I'll be like, just think about it for a little while, and then I'll come back later and ask you. And I might have had, in my own mind, I might have the answer or what I think. But there are times when he'll be like, no, don't do that. And he's very intuitive and he's listening. And then I'll be like, you really are listening. And I'll say it like that back. So I think just not leaving the person out.
Yes.
You don't have to necessarily bring them into every major decision, because some of those you just have to make. And because of the circumstances, it depends on what they're going through. But if you're able to engage that connection element, I think it's really important. And I try to think like, what would I want if I was in his situation?
Absolutely.
And some of that is just leave me alone. Just like go away, leave me alone. Like, okay. You know, like he doesn't have a filter, so it's kind of refreshing. Like, okay, go away, bye.
You know, I like how because that was actually going to be one of my questions, is how do you help Ray feel heard? And it sounds like you do that in everything, you know, even involving him in those little decisions, or at least throwing it out to him, or involving him in making sure that the rice doesn't get burnt. You know, use the timer and make sure the rice doesn't get burnt. You know, involving him in those types of things, and making him still feel connected in that way is very, very important. You know, Alex, do you feel like as a caregiver, there are some misconceptions about caregiving, you know, whether it be for a spouse or a loved one, anything that you feel in particular that people may not really understand or they take for a given?
Yeah. So, I guess the one that people wonder, they never tell you because it's really personal. And they think that intimacy is gone. And at least in our case, I know it depends on the actual condition of the person you're caring for, but they think intimacy is gone. And I, you know, sometimes in jest with family, I will be very vocal that that's not necessarily like gone. It hasn't like disappeared. And it also has changed, like whatever that is, you know, it's just different now. Like that's one of the things that has helped me mentally. It's just being like, it's not that it's over, it's that it's different.
Right.
And I think that has really helped me. And it's even helped me with like being able to like dream and to build and to like, okay, yeah, we thought we'd be able to do this and that, but not now. So what else can we do? So that would be one of the biggest misconceptions just around like the intimacy in the relationship to husband and wife. The intimacy. Another misconception is that another misconception in the sense of like what people think about caregivers is that you know what you're doing. like, oh, you know what to do, you know what you're doing. And this isn't like, you can take a caregiver course and learn the mechanics, right? Like how do you turn somebody? How do you do this? How do you do that? But in reality, I think every situation is different. And so you don't really know. most of the time you're just figuring it out as you go. Oh yeah, this is going to work. This isn't going to work. So sometimes people think you just know what you're doing, or that, you kind of become a nurse or a Google doctor in the process. As I always
right.
become that, but I think that might be one of the misconceptions. Or that another one is that you're miserable, right? That people think, oh, like you're miserable, your life is over. Like that's another one. Oh, your life is over. And part of how do I say this? Part of what you thought your life was going to be might be over, but it's not really over. You just have to recalibrate, or like the Google Maps do, rerouting. You're just rerouting all the time. Like, okay. And so, and I purposely fight my identity being solely as the caregiver. Like for a while, that was all embracing. Like I'm the caregiver, like that's what I do, and this is my purpose. And yes, I definitely know it's part of my purpose for this season, in time, as long as it's to be. But at the same time, I have been really working to develop my identity as just me. Like, hey, and that it doesn't necessarily always go back to caregiving. It's one element. I suppose I would relate that to like being a parent or being a brother or sister. That's not like solely what you do. There's like other elements. And so I think those are sometimes misconceptions that people, and here's another one, that you are getting help, that you're getting help from the government or some program. There's just going to be some program out there that will help you. Like you're not getting help. Like you're not getting help for this or that. And those of us who are in the in-between, like we don't qualify for other programs and because we have too much income. There's so many dynamics in that. And it's not even enough to get over, like to do this. And I'm sure you've heard this from other caregivers, is that people sometimes assume that due to the circumstances that you're getting like all this help, or that you can get all this money from programs. And maybe you can in certain circumstances, because this is a whole other conversation, but that's not always the case. And so sometimes when I communicate that, they're like, oh, you should try to get this and try to get that. And I'm like, yeah, like I filled out every form, just didn't happen. Like I filled out every form because again, my advice was read and ask questions. And so, but I'm always searching. And that's why I refer to, they're within the state program. They have ones that aren't always necessary income-based. So because you can have an income that will push you over the line by $1, and then you qualify, but you still really need help, right? Because you're buying griefs, and griefs are like not cheap. They're like an expense. And so I did benefit from a state program on particularly griefs, and I was like so excited. And so it's those little things.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I'm going to let Christina ask a few questions here.
All right. So Alex, just so that the viewers know, we have had you planned to be on this show, on this podcast for a few months now, but you've had some health issues. Your husband, Ray, had some health issues. And so we had to postpone it. And we were talking about this before we started recording, in particular about his dysphagia, about his swallowing difficulties that he had. Can you tell me, so I want to talk about that. I'm a speech therapist, and that's something that's an area that's my kind of area of expertise. So can you tell me, as a caregiver, what was your first clue or symptom that you saw that made you go, there might be a swallowing problem, or there might be something wrong with his nutritional intake?
Yes. So just to I won't go too long on it, but my husband had a full mouth extraction. All the teeth came out. And that's important to know because dysphagia might show up in different ways. So in his circumstances, he was able to communicate like, it hurts me to swallow. Yeah. And so that became the issue. He didn't want to drink and he didn't want to eat. And so that set the alarms off of there's probably something else going on that he's not quite able to articulate that's beyond, I just don't want to eat and drink, right?
Mhm.
So you can have two situations. And when this was happening, in full transparency, it freaked me out because he doesn't want to eat. He
Mhm.
doesn't want to drink. Is he giving up? Like, these are enough reading. You start thinking, okay, is he like just done? You know, like, is he not communicating? Is he depressed and not telling me? Like, you go through this myriad of things, and that kind of set me off into a little bit of a tailspin, in complete honesty. And energetically, even I was like not wanting to eat. It was weird.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I was like, there's something wrong. He's not eating or drinking. So when we went, so he was literally having problems swallowing.
Mhm.
And so at that time I was like, oh yeah, we ended up in the hospital, due to him not eating and drinking, which caused dehydration. And, then, you know, that's when we were there, and they were like, you know, there's issues. He ended up having oral thrush. There ended up being an actual physical, like a medical reason why he couldn't swallow.
Right.
But in that process, we did have speech therapy in the hospital. They were kind of just navigating around, like, why is he not eating? And it was a perfect storm of like not having teeth. Kind of, I guess the word that the speech therapist said maybe in a food aversion, like because he hadn't been eating, and then he suddenly has no teeth, and then you have like weird textures, and then you're just like, I don't want to eat.
Yeah.
So those were some of the symptoms. Like, I would give him food, like, eat, like the family would come over, and he'll just give him something he wants to eat. And I was like, okay, he's basically living on ice cream. So
Mhm.
happy with that, but he's losing weight too fast, and there's some, you know, bigger issue. So it was like noticing all those things. So if you're caring for someone who suddenly has like a total food change,
Yes.
or they're coughing, like aspiration. That was my biggest thing. Like, is it
Correct.
getting to his lungs? If he's drinking thin, you know, and he had an instance where he drank some liquid Tylenol, and he was just like coughing, and like, it freaked him out. It freaked me out. And I'm like, maybe something happened when he was under general anesthesia for the teeth. So maybe something happened in his throat. I mean, very likely. Did they intubate him? I think they did it through his nose, but still, maybe, you know, your mind can go everywhere. Like,
Absolutely.
Right.
so that was really all of the events that kind of went around that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it wasn't until the side effects of not eating and drinking from the thrush that you realized that dysphagia or swallowing difficulty was actually the culprit, was actually the problem, was the swallowing. It wasn't until he actually went into the hospital because of dehydration that you realized that the swallowing issue was the main culprit.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't eating, and then he was going like this, like it hurts to swallow, like it hurts to swallow. And then those of you who don't know oral thrush, like, you can look at someone's tongue, they usually have like a white coating or something like that. That showed on him, and I was like, okay. So then I was like, okay, the antibiotics then caused this fungus, and then now he's on fungus medicine, and then like, just like, I don't know, is it coming up? Because usually the conversations, is it acid reflux? He wasn't having enough food or drink to tell me if it was burning, or, you know, was there a throat, or because, you know, the speech therapist, like, it could be narrowing, and so they did order the barium swallow test. I was explaining that they brought the mobile unit out, which was awesome. And so we rolled him up there. And at that time, it was a little bit later. So we were discharged from the hospital. And he was starting to increase his food intake a little bit. And then he was able to get, you know, they give you like applesauce, and they give all those things, and we saw it. So I was seeing him swallowing. They're like, yeah, he's swallowing. And so he kept working with the speech therapist as well. And just started doing the increase, like, okay, let's take 5 bites. Okay. And so every time she would come over for therapy, I'd be like, okay, we have a meal. And we'd like, let's eat. And we would cheer him on. And then sometimes he would just start spitting food out. He just like just spitting it out.
Yeah.
Like, that's when we were trying the different, like you said, high calorie shakes and different things. I was trying to get something in, because I was trying to avoid a secondary trip to the hospital. And,
Absolutely.
and so in that process, it just slowly started. Like I just did a lot of praying and slowly he started kind of figuring it out, navigating. And he just really loves food. That's like who he is. So I know he was hungry. I was like, oh no, there's something deeply wrong if he's not eating. But yeah, so he just slowly started. And I think too, there's a great psychology and like, we took the test and you were able to swallow. So and the speech therapist was like, you don't really have a complete problem swallowing. Like you have a little delay. We're seeing it go. And we actually watched a little video together. Oh my goodness. And he could see and was like, so it's going down the right pipe. You're okay. It's not going, but, and she said, just make all the things, like make sure you sit up, your way, work on his head. And so slowly started doing that. And then like, night and day, he started eating better. And I think,
so I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just think he started getting new flavors and new deliciousness. That was in him.
So touch on a little bit about, because I'm sure they had him at probably like a pureed meal, especially after having his teeth pulled. He was on probably like a pureed diet, or what was did they start you out at pureed and then kind of slowly progress him up to something with a little more consistency to it? Or what was that journey like for him?
Yeah. So like it's so funny when you leave like dentistry, even though it's separate, they don't always like go into all the details. So they give you like a list, like mashed potatoes, macaroni and cheese, like different things. But when you start looking at that list, you're like, can someone really like chew this with no teeth? Like, some of those things but they're like the basic things, Jello, mashed potatoes, like just soft. So from the dentist off, it was probably more mechanically soft. So like those in the food world and speech know there's the difference between mechanically soft and puree. And if you don't, you can Google it. It's fascinating to watch videos.
Yeah. I agree completely.
Yeah. So mechanically soft was more of the instructions from the dental side. But when we were in the hospital, then that's when they were like, yeah, we recommend puree, because the status of his swallowing still in the hospital was not determined because they hadn't done the swallow test. So but they did do puree, and that's just a totally like different thing. And so they would bring out, he was okay with thins. So they didn't, those of us when you have care for someone, you understand between thins and thick. And if you have swallowing issues, you need to have different consistencies, even with things you drink. So he was okay with like water and things like that. So the thins were fine, which was really kind of a sign, I think, then that he was able to swallow. Because if there was bigger issues, then that would have been an issue too. Because he had experienced that before during the stroke. He had trach, and he was on thick liquid. So he put that in So he had gone through that journey before. So he was able to get down the thins. We were still monitoring him because of the coughing that would happen so often. But I think that was, again, the perfect storm with the throat issue and the antibiotics and all that. So anywho, I lost my train of thought.
Oh, yeah. You're talking about his different levels.
The different levels. Yeah. So puree. So they were like with pureed, and I was like, okay, you can only like puree. So like gets kind of boring, like potatoes or things you kind of have to find the right consistency. So I just went on YouTube, and I was telling you before we started recording, like I found this great chef, Tasty Puree, and he was like making everything pureed, but it was like fun. He even did spaghetti and meatballs and pancakes, In-N-Out burger, and I was just like, what is this? I'm sending the videos to the family members, being like, you gotta see this. And I was like amazed, because it, just like in the hospital, they bring it where it's like, it looks like a patty, it looks like this. And so I consider myself a creative person, but maybe not in the kitchen. But then I got inspired. Like I was like, oh, I think I can do some of these. So I made the ground beef, put that in the blender, then made it soft and then kind of shaped it in a little bit of a burger type, like a patty, and just started thinking outside of the box. As if you have any foodies in your family, whether they're caregiving or whether you're taking care of them and they're still foodie, you'll know that presentation is important too. Like when you just see blobs of stuff, it's like, oh yeah, I want to eat this. Like you want to see blobs, and so just finding different ways to present it, and make it a box, because like, soft. You start finding things that are soft and that are palatable, and I knew he was having a turnaround during Christmas time, he got a Lindt chocolate, those little chocolate balls, and they're super soft on the inside. So I was like, I took the chocolate ball and I went like that and I crushed it and it was like, yeah, I think he's gonna have this. You're right, okay. But enough that would melt in his mouth and it was soft enough. And I knew if I gave him in small pieces, he would definitely navigate this. So I said, and I was inspired because we saw the Wonka movie over. And like you can't watch Wonka and not have chocolate. It's wrong.
That's right.
So we had that chocolate and his whole face lit up and he was eating and I was like, yeah, you're back. Like we're gonna figure this out. So I think that just kind of safely experimenting would probably be the word. You don't want to and that was it, like macaroni and cheese. Everyone's like, oh, macaroni and cheese. But for him, it wasn't that easy because you think like a little macaroni, he was pocketing it and then he was just out. And I'm like, okay, so I put that in the blender and added a little extra cheese to make it more gooey. And puree is one of those things you kind of have to figure out without it just being like gross puree. And so there were different things that just through process and elimination. And then some things he figured out, like spaghetti. I had to slice it up really small. And I was like, I gave him a little bit and I was like, are you really eating this? Because he was like just diving in. And I was just like, okay, I think about things like digestion too. Sure. So it was really just kind of experimenting in different ways.
So where's he at now then, as far as his food consistency is concerned?
So I would say he's probably mechanically soft and puree. Okay. We ventured out, so like a sweet potato. So instead of just mashing it, and I learned this from another caregiver, she sliced the sweet potato and put it on the pan, and so it's still soft. It's still sweet potato soft, but she had a little cinnamon and made it look like almost like a sweet dessert. But it presented, and he was able to go like this and eat it, and it's soft. And then the pancake. You might think a pancake that's so breaded. And so from the Tasty Puree, shout out video on how to make pancakes soft, pureed and with the fork test and everything. And I followed the instructions and I was shocked. And I cut it up into little pieces as well because it still keeps even though it's so soft, it still kept its consistency. Little honey on there. And then his face lit up when he saw that. I said, pig eggs. And he ate those no tomorrow. We started with one and now he's like, how many pancakes do you want? 2. And then, and then soft scrambled eggs. So at first he wasn't wanting to do that. The eggs were I don't know if it was overwhelming or what. I tried to puree them, but that wasn't happening. It's was stuck to oatmeal and stuff. So it's with your particular person that you're taking care of, if they do have those issues, you just kind of have to safely experiment and kind of see which ones they're able to kind of get down properly and different things like that. 'Cause sometimes I was kind of shocked that it was, but yes.
Yeah. And the thing that I find interesting, even when I, as a speech therapist, would recommend to my patients or their family caregivers, they need to be on this diet consistency or this thick and liquid consistency. Nobody knows the loved one or the patient like their family caregiver.
Right.
And so that's safe. You do what you got to do. I'm here just to make all it is a recommendation, and I'm here to tell you that based on what I found, they have a higher risk than somebody else that doesn't have dysphagia of developing a lung infection like pneumonia. And so, but you still, as the family caregiver, you know your loved one better than I would ever know them. Even if I did the cookie swallow study on them, mine just, well, the mechanism looks like it works, but you know them, you know what they like, what they don't like, and making those safe experiments and stuff. Don't, listen to what they're saying, but you know them the best. So make that decision. And Alex, it sounds to me like you take such great care of Ray. And not only of Ray, but of yourself, and including your family members and your community who want to feel helpful. But at a time like this, they feel helpless, and asking for that help so that they feel helpful and you get the help that you need. I applaud you, and I think you're doing an amazing job. And if you guys want to, if you want to have some inspiration, follow Alex on her Instagram page. Follow Ray's Instagram page if you want to laugh, because he does those jokes, and that's how I found you, was Ray's jokes that he would tell. And some days he didn't feel like telling jokes, but sometimes he did, and so follow those for some inspiration, those pages. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Lance and see if he has any other closing questions.
Oh, thank you, Cindy and Christina. Alex, again, thank you so much. We'll have the Instagram pages up on the screen as well as in the show notes for our viewers and listeners. Before we close here, I just want to ask a quick question. Is there anything that we can do to help support you in your caregiving role?
Oh, thank you so much. First of all, I just want to say thank you, all of you, for allowing me this opportunity. I love to share because I am a sharer. That's at work. Share. And really, it's just continuing to share with other people, like what we're doing here. That would be helpful for me personally. I always ask for prayers. And if you run across like something that I need to know, or I don't have a huge community, it's growing, but if you think it would be helpful to the community that I communicate to, like, please share it, because I'm always cultivating and curating like helpful information, like practical things that could help other caregivers as well. So I think this is really about a community of like sharing our knowledge. And so I know with Christina and Cindy and now Lance that when I run across people that I think would be a great fit for the audience that you reach, I will, as you can tell, I'm always like, no, you gotta talk to this person, talk to this person, talk to this because one of my superpowers is connecting. And so I think it's really important. That's how you can help me. We can let other caregivers know that there is help, there are groups, there are support groups, because so many people feel alone. And if they have community, it just makes it easier. And then really like helping people with the very practical things of like, how do you get help? Like, how do you, reach out, but like, how do you do that? And like, sometimes it's just people needing help fill out a form. It sounds really simple, but you also have a generation that might not be so tech savvy. And now everything's on the internet. Click this link, fill it out. Click this link, fill it out. And it intimidates a lot of people. They're like, I don't know how to do that. And even language barriers as well. Like they don't, if you're able to, this is something just coming to my head now. Like if you're able to think about also translating some of this with the AI tech that we have now into other languages for people that this information that you're sharing.
Absolutely. All right. Well, now it's time for our caregiving tip of the month.
Today I'm going to let you in on a little therapy secret. You ever wonder why a therapist recommends one walker over another? Let's start with the standard walker. So as you can see here, this has 4 legs, no wheels. Why would I recommend this for somebody? If they have an injury or a problem with one of their legs versus the other, this might be a walker that I recommend to them because they may be non-weight bearing. So maybe they can't bear weight on one leg. This is going to be a stable walker that you can put forward and really put some good pressure down through as you advance your good leg. So that's what I would use a standard walker for. front-wheeled walker or two-wheeled walker. I might use this in a scenario where someone is recovering and maybe they had increased weight bearing. Maybe they are what we call weight bearing is tolerated, which means they can put as much weight on that leg as they want to or feel comfortable doing. So with that, this is going to start getting them closer to working on a more normal gait pattern or walking pattern. So that's why I would recommend something like this. I might also recommend this for someone who has some trouble with stability, maybe is weak, needs some pretty good stabilization, just for working on that normal walking pattern. All right, a rollator or a four-wheeled walker, who would I recommend this for? So if I've got somebody that is pretty good on their feet but maybe has some balance issues, needs something for stability, but is pretty active, maybe goes out quite a bit, this is what I would recommend for them. They're going to be able to handle this better. The caster wheels on the front is going to give them a little bit more flexibility in the maneuverability of this walker. This is not one that they're going to bear a lot of weight on. This is used more for just stability, balance, maybe transporting things like food or groceries or things like that.
Thank you for joining us again here at the Caregivers Journal podcast, where we're talking with real caregivers about their caregiving journeys. We look forward to seeing you again here next month.